Dan O'Brien, class of 1992. Wow. Playwright. A decade ago, when Dan O'Brien was asked for a word of wisdom by the staff of Bandersnatch, Dan responded, "Reality leaves a lot to the imagination." Think about that. That's pretty good. Imagination he must have in spades, winning the Osborne Award presented by the American Theater Critics, the Mark Twain Comedy Writing Award, and a play, The Dear Boy, based in large part on a veteran Scarsdale high school teacher. Dan is not with us today, and we have one more person, unless I've lost it, and that is James Traub. Now, first of all, I have to admit it up again. The first thing I wrote down was James Traub, 1972, my favorite class. That's the way it is. Journalist, writer, Sunday New York Times magazine, author of 10 books, including City on a Hill on CCNY, Best Intentions on Kofi Annen. And for years, Jim has participated in Writing Day at the middle school. I found you wandering around lost about 10 years ago, doing this wonderful Writing Day as a gift to the community. His Bandy quote did not help him get a job at the Times. "Love is the botulism in the cold Vichyssoise of life."
I was going to get up there and say thank you, Eric, for not having read my book.
Come on up. Yes. What a neat thing. I think the last time I asked James to speak was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I found an old paper he had written and gave it to him. Was it this one? Oh my God, yep. Whoa, we didn't set this up. Whoa.
We'll come to this. I'll try to be brief because I'm the last person, but it's not really in my nature. First, I'm just hugely honored and flattered to have gotten this award. And going last, and hearing what everybody else has accomplished, I feel all the more so because so many of the other honorees have really shaped the world and made the world a better place. I just write. I mean, I try to understand the world. That's my relationship to it. It's kind of solitary, and I suppose it's kind of a critical thing to do, but it fits my nature. So when Eric informed me that I was going to be honored this way, I tried to give some thought to what it is about growing up here that made me do what I do for a living. Now, the fact is, I was not a very happy 16-year-old, or 15-year-old, or 17-year-old. My friends were not terribly happy 16-year-olds. I didn't actually know any happy 16-year-olds till I produced one myself and kind of learned that it's possible to be well-adjusted at that age. And so I've wondered, is that just because that's that age? Well, not everybody's like that. It must have something to do with this place in that moment. I don't blame Scarsdale in any way at all, but growing up here in the late 1960s and early 70s was just, I think, an uncomfortable moment. We were all, of course, lefter than left. But then at the same time, unlike somewhat older kids, we didn't have a burning sense of certainty about what was just. We kind of knew what was bad and didn't know what was good. So there was this kind of ideological element. And then whether it was because of that or other things, there was just a sense of kind of discomfort in ourselves. Now, Eric, who I know loved our class, may dispute all this and think this is in my mind, but I think that's how we felt at the time. A kind of, we would always use the word alienated, of course. We didn't know what we were alienated from, but we knew we were alienated. Uncomfortable. Too ironic for our own good. Embarrassed. I was thinking, this phrase suddenly popped into my head, existential embarrassment, which is kind of how I felt, which, alas, that Bandersnatch quote that Eric read kind of exposes that all too clearly. And so then I think, well, okay, what does that have to do with who I am now? And in a curious way, even though all that I know sounds bad and probably wasn't great at the time, it's not a great environment, I suppose, for producing happy people. It's actually kind of a good environment for producing what I became. That is to say, it gave me a certain kind of critical distance from the world. It gave me the habit of thinking. I think it made us all very self-conscious. That can be crippling self-awareness, but it can also be a wish to understand the world. Not, in a way, being uncomfortable with yourself is the beginning of understanding, or at least of trying to understand, of not being complacent, of not taking things for granted. And so even that, which at the time I would have told you was just kind of gloomy, I now understand is a funny kind of seedbed for what I became, what others of my friends became. But then beyond that, Glenn and I were actually talking beforehand, and Glenn said, you know, the bad stuff at the time was kind of our daily life, but the good stuff was our teachers. And at some level, that's true. And so I know everybody here has talked about how much that meant to him, but there are just a few things I want to say. First, if you had asked any of our friends, me or any of my friends at the time, who mattered to you, who matters to you in shaping your mind, there are a lot of people we would have mentioned, but everybody would have said two people. Werner Feig, who Glenn also mentioned, and Eric. Werner Feig, alas, has passed away. I suspect in retrospect that he was a little bit more like us, that there was a kind of deep grit of uneasiness in him which made him goad us and kind of mock us in ways that turned out to be incredibly productive for real thought. And we all loved him and feared him. Eric wasn't like us at all in that way. Eric was an enthusiast. You know, as Glenn said, he taught like playing tennis. He was an infectiously enthusiastic figure who made us happy to be there and I think channeled all of that kind of intellectual energy, but, you know, that kind of brittle thing into something deeply thoughtful. And he always, I think we felt when we were in his class that, oh, this is what college is like. We're in college now. And the other classes were great too, but now we're in college. And so I did bring with me just the title page of this article. I promise you, I never kept the thing I wrote in high school. It's all just too mortifying. It's like keeping the poetry I wrote when I was 15, you know, all burned. And by the way, I was incredibly impressed that Glenn not only kept a journal, but apparently still has it, which shows that he was just a much better adjusted person than I was. So, first of all, I got an A- on this paper. So it wasn't like, you know, people probably think that Eric just gave an A to all of his, you know, his like most desired students, but not at all. So it was an A-. The title will give you some impression of what a little dork I was at the time. The title is Tom Watson, the famous populist figure who went from a great populist hero to being a terrible right-wing rabble-rouser who helped to found the Ku Klux Klan, the Ku Klux Klan. Tom Watson, Transformation of an Agrarian Radical, or, I felt I have to have two titles, the I'm Losing My Mind and My Party and My Politics, which, by the way, I misspelled even on the cover page. Eric circled it. My Political Stature, all at the same time, Blues. No, that's not enough. Then there's an asterisk pointing to the bottom where there's a third. Subtitled, How Can I Write Two Papers at Once When I'm Not Anywhere at All? Which is an incredibly feeble reference to a Firesign Theater record at the time, which was what all of us alienated, ironic kids were listening to. So that's now, so how anybody could read this at all is remarkable, but I want to read just a few things Eric wrote because they are telling. First of all, he begins with criticism. Jim, this paper starts off very slowly with a number of unanswered questions. In the beginning, even your writing deserts you. Now, that was so important for me to hear. I don't know whether I absorbed it at the time, but all of us kind of facile kids who were just too impressed with our own mouthiness. In Eric, we found someone who was going to be totally encouraging, but then at the same time make demands that we be the best we could be. So he then goes on and says nicer stuff. And he says nice quotations from Hofstadter, the famous historian Hofstadter, Richard Hofstadter. And then in parens, you know, of course, that Hofstadter's views here have been under attack for a number of years. The "of course" is almost the most telling. Of course you know that. Now, let's think about this for a second. Richard Hofstadter, this, you know, I mean, I think, I don't know if it was Jenny or someone was talking about the fact that Eric had us read these really serious people. And by the way, we read someone to the left of Howard Zinn, Jesse Leamish, who was a Marxist historian. He was to the left of everybody. But the fact that you know, of course, that Hofstadter's views are in dispute, as opposed to just thinking, isn't it great I'm having you read Richard Hofstadter? And so that expectation that we would know something like that and we would think about something like that, and by the way, this expectation was so normal to us that the class genius, David Scobie, wrote a paper about Hofstadter, which, as I remember, began, "There is much that is good and usable in Hofstadter." A very complicated joke about a Hofstadter essay on populism, which began, "There is much that is good and usable in populism." So we all took for granted something which I now recognize was astonishing. And so everyone has said how prepared they were for college, and so was I, because we were called to this level of intellectual sophistication, and it became part of us. And only now can I recognize how rare that was. And I just want to tell Eric something I think he doesn't know, because I think maybe this will make him feel proud of me, which is I'm now writing a biography of John Quincy Adams. And I'm a journalist. I write about living people. But I had this desire. I don't know where it came from, but now I think maybe I do, to write a biography, to write a history of a great American figure. And honestly, the last time that I think I thought deeply about American history was in AP American History. So it is still so constitutive of who I am. So I just can't thank Eric enough. And thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.
That's great. Wow. I put down my own paper.